Warning. The following broadcast is not approved by your teacher, university, politician, or government. Side effects may include skepticism, better reasoning skills, liberty, peace, and an escape from the woke.
Welcome to the show. I am your host, LB Muniz, and this is the Been Awake podcast for Better Sensemaking. I got something I want to go over tonight. I'm not going to do a big pre-interlude or anything like this. So here's the setup, right? Here's the setup. There is a discourse happening right now, right? There's a conversation happening online on X, and I'm assuming other social media, but that's the one I use. And hey, if you want to follow me on social media at the LB Muniz, there's this discourse happening right now where people are talking about this group that they are trying to encapsulate as the quote unquote woke right. The woke right. I don't actually know who, like, on the one hand, it includes people that I don't like, and on the other hand, it includes people that I do like, some people whom I've even interacted with at times, and it almost makes me wonder, am I the woke right? Now, part of this is connected to an article that I posted at beenawake.com, which you can go and read right now. If you were so inclined, you could go and read my article about James Lindsay versus... what did I call it? James Lindsay versus St. Michael the Archangel. And basically this guy, James Lindsay, who like 5 years ago would have been one of those people that I said, yes, he is the one. When he says something, I pay attention because he normally gets things right. Is part of what's been happening, I guess you could say, in broadly right-wing discourse. And I don't want to we might belabor the conversation of what is left and what is right within this episode. This has been consuming my mind for the last couple of hours. I've even been having a bit of a back and forth. That's definitely going to be in a future episode. I want to keep this episode limited to, but basically, this guy, James Lindsay, said that like it's bad that Donald Trump posted the St. Michael the Archangel prayer. Go read the piece. I'm going to cover it more in depth now, though, especially that we have some updates here. Long story short, he posted something in some right-wing journal of some kind that I have never heard of. That was him reinterpreting Karl Marx. And basically like, Christian nationalists are putting the Karl Marx in their articles and on their pages. I don't know. I haven't read everything. I don't, who has the time? And that's part of what I want to talk about tonight. And, some people are saying that he purposefully rewrote things. Some people are saying that was the whole point. He did this once in the left and it was really cool. Of course, that was a lot different because those were considered academic journals, right? Not just like an online publication. Maybe I'm getting some of the details wrong. It's not really what I wanted to talk about tonight. Tonight, I have a schema for you guys. If you don't know what that is, it's basically me drawing some stuff out here on my iPad for you to see. If you're just listening, don't worry. I'm going to describe it. But, I do put out video versions of the show, and sometimes we need to visually represent things in order to understand them better. So I've got these schemas, and I'm just trying to sketch out a problem that I see with microblogging and social media interactions. And I'm saying microblogging because X, Twitter, is the platform that I use the most. But if I really think about it, it's pretty much all social media at this point. Like any social, like you can get lost just as much as you can get lost. You can lose context by looking at things by putting too few characters. You can lose context by putting too many characters. If you think about it, that's what the left does, right? They try to re-engineer language in such a way to better serve their point, and they fill the page up with a specific jargon in order so that they understand it, and they make sure that you don't. So this is a phenomenon that I've observed for a while, and some of it does come from this. Some of it does come from kind of what I've been witnessing is like, okay, like I used to listen to these people, and then I heard some stuff from some other people, and my perspective shifts a little bit. And in turn, I start to look for better ways of understanding and relaying the information that I take into my little network of people. You good listeners who are doing it. By the way, this would be a good episode to share. This is a little more on the theory side, but I think it's very applicable. And I think this applies to multiple other aspects of our lives. And certainly, if you are interested in organizing your mind in such a way that you have the best understanding of things, it doesn't matter if we're talking about politics, philosophy, economics, or business. This is a way. This is kind of what you're always dealing with. I think politics really, really, really amplifies it. So let's see if this goes anywhere good, shall we? So the problem with microblogging or social media interactions. And so I have figure 1 here. And basically figure 1, as you can see, is kind of like a circle with a bunch of other circles inside of it. And I'll kind of explain what I mean by that here really quickly. So my biggest circle here, or kind of oval, if you will, it's the point is I'm trying to put a limit on everything because everything requires limit. The biggest circle here is a given platform, right? In this case, let's say this is the X platform. Who's on the X platform? Well, there's this group and 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 this group. There's all these little groups, each of which I'm representing with a circle. I'm putting some other circles that intersect with those because some people are part of multiple groups at the same time. Some groups are bigger. Some groups are smaller. Some groups take up a lot of space. Some groups might just be a little dot over here in the corner. But this is kind of the chaos, right, that is any social media platform. These are all different groups of people, which you could then subdivide. If we want to, let's say, zoom into one of these groups, we would have other little groups inside of it. Or maybe we would even get into like little people inside of those. This is a basic schema of how reality works, and I think it holds true for multiple areas of our lives. So each individual person puts themselves into one group or another. Those groups are amongst other groups, and those groups are of varying size and influence in any sense, but certainly on a platform like X. Now, part of another problem that we have here, right, is a concept that I've kind of toyed with in my mind, and one that I want to kind of put in your mind at the moment, which is distributed culture. Yes, I know, I have horrible handwriting, but distributed culture. So what does that mean? Well, I think for pretty much all of human existence, your culture was a direct reflection of where you were from, the type of family you were born into, the type of job that your parents had, and the type of job you would have, and that would kind of work its way up. I would kind of like represent that in terms of a Fibonacci sequence into larger and larger groups, right? So it might start, if it starts with you, and then you kind of have your family, and then you would have your friends, and then you would have like work, and then you would have like your state, and then maybe your country. Yes, I have horrible handwriting. And it would go on and it would get bigger and bigger and bigger from there, right? So again, we have this spiral, this Fibonacci sequence. And I think that's one of the ways that culture worked for a long period of time. But now we have this thing called the internet, which removes those barriers that culture it's kind of like water when you pour it on a table, right? It's just going to kind of spread out. So this distributed culture means that those barriers, that natural flow is interrupted. And in fact, your main source could come from something that's way over here, like conceptually speaking, right? None of this isn't like I'm drawing lines and circles, but this is about the mind and how we find our place in the world. So we have this issue of distributed culture. I got this idea from, like a distributed workforce, right? All these people working remote. So even though they're not geographically proximate to each other, they can still come together to, accomplish a mission. And I think ideas work the same way. And one of the things that the internet's done is kind of created this thing. And that, again, that leads to this whole thing of social media where we're just all these little circles inside of a bigger circle, if you will. So figure 2. So figure 2 here, I've created a basic left-right paradigm here, right? We're not going to worry too much about what the left-right paradigm is. We're going to use, or just whatever you think it is, let's work with that for now. I'm not going to, I've definitely talked about in previous episodes what left and right could be defined as and what they should, and perhaps what they should be defined as in many cases. But for now, we're just going to stick with the fact that there is a left, there is a right. And what I've done here is, basic left-right breakdown. We have 8 circles and 10 circles. I was just kind of doing this quickly on one side and the other side. But if you notice each of these circles, or if you're listening, each of these circles, I put different letters inside. And what I'm trying to get at here, again, conceptually speaking, is I'm trying to break down how, while you could categorize, because for the sake of our argument, these people would loosely co-align. These people would loosely align with each other, right? We can group them into these 2 groups. We can quibble over who belongs where, but for the purposes of our argument here, for the purposes of the argument for the conversation we're trying to have tonight, is they generally can go together for one reason or another. Even though we can easily group these individual subsets, right? These are the little circles that belonged in the bigger circle of social media or a society writ large. Even though each of these little circles is grouped into one of 2 main categorizations, they can be further subdivided, right? So here we have an A type for the left, a B type for the left, a D type for the right, a D type for the right. These letters don't mean anything per se except to signify that they are different. So even though they can all be loosely correlated into these 2 broad terms, left and right, there's still subdivisions within them, as I demonstrated in the first figure as well. So now we move to figure 3. So this is where I'm going to start to demonstrate the problem as I see it. So as you see here, I've got two pyramids or 2 triangles here, and I used those because they very well represent a hierarchical distribution. And I labeled them, right, starting with S and then A, B, C, D, S, A, B, C, D. The idea behind this is your S tier, so to speak, is going to be the people who are best able to formulate arguments in the best way possible, in regardless of perspective, right? These are the people that actually put the work in to formulate the best kind of argument. I'm not saying that one person has to be an academic or not. I don't even think an academic explanation is necessarily a prerequisite for what we're talking about here, but suffice it to say, think about anything. I'm in sales, so let's think about sales for a second. There are people who sell really, really good, and there are people who sell used cars. So no offense to used car salesmen. That was a little joke at your expense. There are people who formulate arguments well, people who formulate arguments very poorly, and then there's a distribution in between. In general, just based off of a Pareto distribution, the fewest number of people are going to be able to, 80-20 rule, the fewest number of people are going to always be the ones that can make the best arguments. It doesn't correlate that the most amount of people can make the best arguments. And in fact, if we think about how arguments can have different resolution, right, it goes all the way from a lengthy book, a book on theoretical explanation, all the way down to a meme picture. You following me so far? I hope so. So you got these 2 little guys here at the top of our figure, and this is what I see all the time. And for the purposes of our discussion, we're only here just so we're kind of all clear here. We're only here on the right. Let's leave the left out of this equation. We're talking about the right here. There are 2 people within the same basic subdivision, the same binary division of people who are making different arguments. Argument A, argument B, or perspective A, perspective B. What I see And what I try not, and you know, I'll engage in this sometimes too. It's fun to make fun of bad arguments, don't get me wrong. But what I see a lot of the time is that when the top tier person is looking for an argument to respond to, they rarely look across. They rarely look across. That almost never happens. They almost always, especially on social media, right? Especially on social media, they almost always are looking down to respond to. Why? Because it's a lot easier. It's a lot easier to respond to this argument down here. It's a lot easier to respond to this argument down here than it is to respond to the argument to the best possible arguments. This isn't to say that there aren't people who don't do that, but this is what I see a lot. Now, there's a benefit to this, right? What's the benefit? Entertainment, for sure, is a huge element to this. And of course, part of what social media is entertainment. So I'm not trying to take that away from anything for the purposes of our conversation. I want to make sure that's clear. But it doesn't matter who it is. I see the best people and the worst people always responding to the lowest common denominator argument. Now, to the extent that as we get lower on our hierarchy here, that the ideas might be simpler. These are simple ideas, right? They might even be like mimetic ideas. So you're kind of responding to the meme of something as opposed to the fully fleshed argument of it. There's a purpose for that, right? But, you know, to quote Thomas Sowell, you know, it would take a paragraph oftentimes it takes a paragraph to refute a bumper sticker. And part of this microblogging thing is that we have to rely on context for almost everything that we talk about. It's one of the nice things about a premium subscription on X is that when you need a little more space now, you can do it. But the platform necessarily tries to have us distill our words. And that's a good thing. There's truth in that sometimes, but it requires context. In fact, it requires there be an alignment of what you actually believe inside of it. And so this phenomenon here leads to this weird like, I don't even know, but like I kind of like was trying to sketch it out. It's not quite a circle per se, but it's this weird chain that continues to happen, right? So person A says something. What they say can either be interpreted honestly or it can be interpreted poorly, right? So person B might say interpreted honestly or interpreted poorly. And then person A immediately will treat that argument, whether it's honest or poorly interpreted, as if they're dumb, as if person B is dumb, which is then going to say A is going to do a proverbial dunk, right? We have a nice burn. We have maybe some sort of attack. We have some sort of ad hominem that's put at somebody. And then A is just going to go back and say the thing that they said. And it's very rare that A and B ever interact face to face. There's very rarely a meeting of the minds between two people in this situation. I suppose you could have some sort of conflict, right? And if there's conflict between those, we would call that a debate. But if you think about it, a debate really isn't about the two people involved. The debate is about the people watching from down here. The debate is about people watching from the bottom up. So then, like, how are we supposed to determine anything, right? And why does this happen? Well, let's go back to our figure 2. Let's go back to it for a minute. And let's actually flesh out, let's use our modern political landscape to flesh out maybe what I'm talking about here. So the left, broadly speaking, has to do with liberalism. And I can't spell. The left has to do with liberal values, right? One of those being egalitarianism. I'm just going to mark that with an E. I'm not going to spell that out right now. I'm just going to mark that with an E, egalitarianism. And there's derivations of that within here. You know, we have our commies, we have our socialists, we have our progressives, we have our left libertarians. And then, you know, if we go to the right, I'm not going to use the term conservative for a reason that will become clear here, but this is the left. This is the right. On the right, we have some conservatives. Of course, we have to ask the question, what are they conserving? Generally speaking, that is liberalism. So there might be an argument that they actually belong over here. That's kind of an interesting thing to ponder. But then, we have our Christians, let's say. We have, that's the broad groups. Then we can subdivide that between the apostolics. That's like our Roman Catholics and our Orthos. And then we have our Protestants. And then we have the good ones. And then we have the bad ones. Like bad ones would be ones that use Marvel stuff for their liturgy. I've seen it; it exists. It's online, mega churches and the like. And then we have another group, and really this is the group that I kind of wanted to do a divide between. We have there's the constitutionalists. We have the constitutionalists, and then we also have another group, and where they are on this scale for the purposes of our conversation tonight, I didn't do a good job of this. We have our disaffected liberals, and we have our atheists. And atheists also have perhaps a larger contingent over here. We have our disaffected liberal atheists. These people are somewhat on the right, in that they might oppose the worst elements of the communism and the progressivism, but just as a matter of course, and again, this label is leading you down a certain path, but part of this is that they are, in fact, it's not that they have a problem with the liberalism, it's that they have a problem with the way these people over here interpret liberalism. Broadly speaking. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't be so rude. We have our right libertarians over here as well, for the most part. So this group, this disaffected liberal group, some of those people have migrated away and abandoned liberalism, in which case they wouldn't be part of the disaffected group anymore, but a lot of them are still holding true to what that is. So the problem then becomes here, liberalism versus, again, for the sake of simplicity, versus Christ. A belief in Christ. Now, let me Jordan Peterson this for a second. Let's include cultural Christians in this group as well. What this basically means here, what we can kind of transmorphize. We're going to work with me here. This is the idea of a religious society in a broad sense of that term, in a philosophical sense of that term, has to do with a moral center. And for liberalism, liberalism actually stands against that. So we're going to put this void moral center. The idea is this, and this is a derivation of Yarvin. It was something that I heard that made a little bit of sense and made more sense as I thought about it. So think of liberalism, this idea of a secular liberal world, as being a pencil, a stone pencil turned on its head, right? So here's the ground. In order for this to work properly, we need people holding up all sides. So we all agree that this thing is going to work, but we all have to put in the effort in order to do so. Well, what happens if you remove one person from one side? What happens if everybody isn't pulling their weight to truly create a liberal society where everybody can be equal, more or less, forgetting the problems with that? Well, what's going to happen? Well, your liberal order is going to collapse on its side. It's going to crack. It's going to break. So everybody has to be willing to do the same thing. Well, what are we dealing with all the time? What has everybody who's been marginally right their life been accused of, right? We've been accused of being the worst kinds of people in existence for the simple fact that we look at the world differently. How can we actually say that we're both doing our part, right? The left and the right. How can we say we're both doing that part when one side thinks the other side is wrong and the other side thinks the other side is evil? Well, I think that's led to a certain awakening on the part of a lot of us out there, which is to say, they don't want to live in peace. They want to wipe out a certain way of thinking, a certain way of life, a certain way of being. And it just so happens that that form of being is the form of being that leads to a stable, happy, productive, fruitful life. And instead, they want to push the opposite of that, the inverse of that, if you will. I know I'm making some leaps here, but going back to the idea of what we're talking about here, this social media thing that happens, I want us to always think of this figure in mind whenever we're looking at a topic, and I hope this helps you make better sense of the world. If you enjoyed this episode, I do hope you'll share it with somebody. I do hope you'll go to beenawake.com. I do hope you'll join the mission of Better Sensemaking by subscribing with your email address. And of course, you can find me on social media at the LB Muniz. Until next time, thanks for listening.
If you like what you heard today, go to beenawake.com to subscribe for future updates. My name is LB Muniz, and I am not one with the woke.